Hello everyone, my name's Jenny. I'm the daughter of Alan Standfield and the granddaughter of Marion Stanfield, May Loader. Her parents were Henry and Christina Loader. My father Alan is the youngest of Marion's 8 children and is still living at age 92 in aged care in Druin. Now Marion married Charles Edward Standfield, who I'll refer to as Ted. They married on the 21st of January 1912 at the Methodist Church parsonage, not in the actual church, in Pleasant Street in Ballarat. Now, a rather exciting find for me about 12 months ago was the existence of a record book which was kept by my grandfather Ted. It's currently in the possession of a cousin who the book was handed to her by her father Len, my uncle Len. Whilst I was having a look at it, I did actually take a photo of each of the pages in the book. It's in a pretty shabby state and has been a little water damaged, so some of the pages are hard to read. I'll just try and show you a photo of the front page so you can sort of see how fragile it is. The book, it covers the time before their marriage, around 1910, and their time in South Australia, up to when they moved back to the farm at Poowong North, which they did purchase, and a couple of years after that time as well. It finishes in about 1928. Now, on the inside cover of the book, it actually has Mr. Edward Standfield, Hoddle Range, South Gippsland, and the first page of the book says Messrs. Loader and Standfield, January 1910. Now, the records indicate that they were in South Gippsland until at least July 1912, which is about when the last entry is, and then it actually doesn't start again till 1915, which is in Galga, South Australia. They moved to Poowong North about 1921, so they've spent roughly about 8 years in South Australia. Of great interest to me was the time they spent at the area called Galga, because there was no town of Galga when we were there. And yeah, my husband and I were there in October 2017, and with the help of the local Karoonda Pioneer Group, we managed to find the property where they lived. Now, Karoonda is still about 50 kilometres south of Galga, so it was a bit of a journey to get there. But one of the neighbouring landowners has an interest in old buildings and history, and he knew exactly where they were. So off we went. The property was actually owned by Ted's sister and brother-in-law, Charlie and Amy Hall. They are from the Foster-Leongatha area, and it's believed that they actually never lived in South Australia. Amy's brothers, Ted and Sam, were the ones that were there. Now, Ted and his younger brother Sam and their wives went to Galga, and they were tasked with the clearing of the land for the planting of the crops. So it was actually quite a number of years before they even made any money out of it. Now, as far as I'm aware, there's actually no photos of the time they were in South Australia, apart from one where their daughter Everil, who was born there, is being held by one of the Hall children, and she wouldn't have been very old at that stage. Now, to help make ends meet while they were clearing the land ready for crop planting, they made ends meet by selling melly roots as firewood, and I think they were somehow dispatched to Adelaide, but I'm not sure how. It did take a number of years for them to make any profit, and with the monies having to be split 3 ways between the 2 brothers and the owners of the land, it was a bit difficult. And when they finally did make a reasonable amount, that's when they purchased the farm back at Poowong North in Gippsland. So Marion and Ted, they would have had a pretty tough life over there the time they were there, the 2 families. The original property at Galga was about 6,000 acres, and today it's been swallowed up by a large landholder and is about 30,000 acres in size. Today it's used for wheat and barley, which was what was growing there when my husband and I were there a couple of years ago. Now, the record book has crop yields listed, not that that means much to me, and it also did have milk production listed once they were back in Victoria. And also with this record book there was some old paperwork, old check butts, and even a couple of letters that Ted's father wrote. So they've been quite interesting. Now for a little bit about Marion and Ted's 8 children. Now, my cousin Val has told me that her mother Nellie, who was her second child, has said that even though the first 2 children, Edna and Nellie, were born at Foster, she thinks they were actually living in South Australia at this time, and that Marion travelled by train back to Victoria to be with family for the births. Now, that would have been a difficult journey as there was no railway line at that time at Galga. But I'm thinking that perhaps they were still living at Foster when Edna was born, as the record book mentions July 1912 still being in South Gippsland. And that was when Edna was born, so maybe they went soon after that. But I do need to do a bit more research on that and try and find out if they were in South Australia when Nellie was born in 1913, and perhaps Marion did travel back by train to Gippsland to be with family for the birth. The next child, Gladys, she was born at Tailem Bend in South Australia, which I guess is not that far away from Galga. And then Leonard was born back in the Creswick-Dalesford area. This is also where Ted Standfield's family was, as well as the Loaders, so that's possibly born back with family. The next child, Everil, she was the one that was actually born at Galga. I haven't actually got a copy of her birth certificate yet, but I'm assuming that she may have been born on the property as what we would call a home birth. There was still no actual town of Galga at that point in time. That didn't really establish till 1915 with the introduction of the railway. Everil actually died at 5 years of age, but they were back living on the farm at Poowong North by then. Then along came Elsie. She was born at Waikerie in South Australia. Then Wesley, he was born back at Ballarat. And then my father, who was quite a bit younger than the rest of the family, and he was born at Druin, and that was when they were definitely on the farm at Poowong North. My father Alan tells me that his mother was a really hard worker, and it wouldn't have been easy for her in South Australia, raising young children and helping her husband and Sam and his wife sort of clear the property and bringing up their children. But generally, she was a great seamstress. She made all the children's clothing, and she also did a lot of knitting and crocheting. The story goes that everyone always knew when Marion was pregnant, because she'd sort of go off by herself into another room and knit and crochet furiously for any child that came along. It seems that there is a family Bible which does have loaders in it, and inside that family Bible, flipping through the pages, I did find some old bookmarks, etc., that my Nana Marion would have made. There's a couple there, and I know one of my cousins has in her possession an embroidered bookmark as well. And I also still have a crocheted rug which was given to my sister. It's got to be about 50 years old. It's sort of a pretty traditional crocheted rug, but we're treating that with sort of very preciously at the moment. It hasn't been washed for a while in the fear that it might fall to pieces. My Nana Marion was also a pianist, and we believe that she used to play for various functions around the Miners' Rest area before her marriage to Ted, and we're thinking that maybe that's perhaps how her and Ted met, maybe at one of these functions, as the Standfield family also lived in the Dalesford area. When they did go back to Poowong North, she was actually the organist at the Methodist Church for quite a number of years before it closed down. My father Alan, being the youngest, he left school at 14. His two older brothers were already otherwise occupied, so when his father died, my father inherited the farm at Poowong North, and today my brother Murray is still on the farm, but as the acreage is only small by today's standards, not really enough to sustain dairy anymore, so he supplements his income by interstate truck driving. I hope this has given you a little bit more insight into Marion Loader's life. I wish all my Victorian relatives the very best in these difficult COVID times. It has been a bit of a strange year. I'm a bit, disruption has been very minimal for me, as I live on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, so we're quite a bit removed for it, but I know you are all going through some pretty tough times down there. I'd love to be down there visiting my father and family, but just not possible. But maybe we can catch up with you next year at the reunion. So I wish you all the best and see you soon.